If you think every inch of London has been mapped, studied, and documented, stay with this story until the end. And if you're drawn to the kind of history that governments prefer left buried, subscribe now. Because what was found beneath this city wasn't meant to be remembered, and definitely not rediscovered. London wakes up early. By 6 a.m., the city is already alive. Buses exhaling at curbsides, trains screaming through tunnels, footsteps echoing across pavements that have carried centuries of ambition, power, and fear. Above ground, everything feels known, predictable. Below it is another story entirely. In the late winter of 2017, during a redevelopment project near Westminster, just minutes from the Houses of Parliament, a construction crew began drilling beneath a narrow side street. The plan was straightforward: reinforce aging infrastructure, stabilize foundations, and modernize work in an old city. London is built on layers. No one expected surprises. Until the drill dropped, there was no resistance, no slow crumble of soil. The machine lurched forward violently, as if the ground had simply vanished beneath it. Sensors spiked, pressure dropped. The drill operator shut everything down immediately. At first, supervisors assumed they had struck an undocumented sewer. London has plenty of those. But when ground-penetrating radar was brought in, the readings didn't match any known utility system. The void beneath them was too clean, too deliberate. When a fiber-optic camera was lowered through the opening, it took several seconds before the light reached anything solid. Then the image sharpened. Stone walls, an arched ceiling, and a tunnel stretching away into darkness. Straight, level, and unmistakably intentional. Not Victorian brickwork, not modern concrete, older and far more precise. Within hours, the site was sealed behind temporary barriers. Workers were told to leave. Phones were checked. The explanation given was structural instability. No press release followed. No mention appeared in the local news. Because the moment specialists from Historic England and the Ministry of Defense reviewed the footage, one thing became clear. This tunnel was not supposed to exist. When the first team entered days later, they descended through a narrow access shaft into air that felt untouched, cool, dry, strangely still. Their boots echoed loudly, the sound traveling far beyond the reach of their headlamps. The tunnel was wider than expected, tall enough for people to walk side by side comfortably. The stonework was hand-cut, cleanly joined, and reinforced at regular intervals. Whoever built it had time, funding, and purpose, and they weren't worried about being discovered. As the team moved forward, markings appeared along the walls, faded but unmistakable. Survey symbols, directional indicators, codes not used in modern engineering, military codes. This was the moment the tone of the investigation changed. London is no stranger to secret tunnels. During the Second World War alone, miles of underground passages were carved beneath the city, some for transport, some for shelter, some for command. But this tunnel didn't match any known wartime plans. It wasn't chaotic or rushed. It felt controlled, measured, as though it had been designed not for panic, but for certainty. Several hundred meters in, the tunnel split. One branch sloped downward, disappearing into deeper darkness. The other continued straight, its floor smoothed by wear, foot traffic over many years. They followed the worn path. The tunnel passed beneath government buildings whose foundations dated back centuries. Beneath offices where laws were written. Beneath chambers where wars were debated. At several points, seismic data confirmed the tunnel ran directly under sensitive sites, places that officially had no underground connections at all. And then they found the first sealed door. It was steel, thick and reinforced, set into stone older than the metal itself. There were no signs warning of its presence above ground. No surface access points. No documentation. The locking mechanism was internal, mechanical, and outdated but sophisticated. Took nearly 3 hours to open. Inside was a room no larger than a small classroom. The walls were bare. The ceiling is low. The air is heavy. Against one wall sat a wooden bench, splintered, worn, its surface polished smooth by repeated use. On the opposite wall, shallow grooves had been carved into the stone, overlapping, chaotic, as if someone had dragged something sharp across it again and again. There were no decorations, no insignia, no obvious purpose, but everyone in that room felt the same thing. This was not a place meant for comfort. This was a waiting room. As exploration continued, evidence of multiple construction phases became impossible to ignore. Some sections were medieval, others bore marks of 19th century tools, and threaded throughout were unmistakably modern additions: electrical conduits, ventilation shafts, emergency lighting fixtures installed decades later. This tunnel had been updated, maintained, hidden in plain sight, and then came the collapse. Roughly a kilometer from the original entry point, the tunnel floor was littered with shattered stone and twisted metal. The ceiling above had been blown inward. Burn marks stained the walls. This wasn't structural failure. It was a demolition. Someone had intentionally destroyed this section. Behind the rubble, scans revealed more voids, more chambers, but no safe way through. The message was clear: do not go further. As archivists combed through classified records, fragments of explanation began to surface. Vague references in Cold War documents, mentions of secure subterranean transit, notes referencing unofficial contingency routes beneath central London. Nothing explicit, nothing complete, just enough to suggest this tunnel had once served a purpose too sensitive to write down properly. Then, in a sealed alcove behind a collapsed side passage, they found something that changed everything. A metal cabinet. Inside were folders damaged by moisture but readable, dated across decades. Some bore stamps from departments that no longer exist. Others carried markings that were never meant for public eyes. The documents referenced movements during times of elevated domestic instability. They described the transfer of persons of interest without surface exposure. They outlined routes beneath the city that bypassed streets entirely. No names, no outcomes, just logistics: cold, efficient, anonymous. The implication was chilling. This tunnel wasn't just for escape. It was for control. For moments when visibility was dangerous, when appearances had to be managed, when someone needed to disappear without the city noticing. The final discovery came late one night, almost by accident. A faint airflow was detected near one of the earliest chambers. A false wall, perfectly blended into the stone, concealed a narrow passage sloping upward. It led toward Whitehall, toward the surface, toward power. The passage was sealed before anyone could follow it fully. Official orders came down within hours. Exploration was halted. Access points were filled. Documentation was classified. Publicly, the discovery was described as an undocumented historical structure of limited significance. Privately, it triggered a complete review of subterranean security beneath central London. Today, the street above looks exactly the same. Cars pass, tourists pose for photos, government buildings loom, solid and confident. And beneath it all,